No one remembered when humanity stopped talking. In the galactic archives, Earth was listed as a quiet species. Industrial, divided, emotional, not extinct, not dangerous, just irrelevant. For most civilizations, silence meant weakness. The Galactic Expansion Alliance believed this completely. Their scouts had passed through human space dozens of times over the centuries. Old satellites drifted like junk. Stations were abandoned. Human colonies looked underdeveloped, fragile, barely defended. No great fleets. No energy shields. No warnings. Just emptiness. That was why Earth was chosen. Not for revenge. Not for fear. For convenience. The Alliance fleet arrived in numbers that usually ended wars before they began. Thousands of ships slid out of hyperspace near the edge of the solar system, their hulls shining with ancient alloys and confidence built over millennia of conquest. They expected panic. They expected noise. They expected to hear Earth scream. Instead, they found nothing. No radio chatter. No military response. No emergency broadcasts. Earth rotated calmly below them, blue and alive, as if unaware that extinction hovered overhead. The fleet commander, Supreme Marshal Keeler, ordered a full system scan. The results made no sense. Human satellites vanished from sensors the moment they were focused on. Probes sent closer stopped transmitting without exploding. Long-range scanners returned static, like space itself refused to be measured. Keeler dismissed it as outdated human tech interfering poorly with modern systems. Primitive tricks, he said. Then a junior officer spoke, voice tight with unease. Marshal, this signal just activated. A single transmission appeared on every screen at once. It was old, damaged. Human language is barely translated correctly. The message repeated on a loop. We told the galaxy to leave us be. No demands. No threat. No explanation. Just that sentence. Some officers laughed. Others shifted uncomfortably. Keeler felt something colder than doubt crawl along his spine. He ordered orbital weapons prepared. The moment the command was issued, gravity failed on 3 warships. Crew members slammed into walls. Consoles shattered. Emergency systems screamed. But there was no explosion. No visible attack. No enemy signature. One of the ships simply folded. Not shattered. Not burned. Folded inward, as if space itself had decided it should no longer exist that way. It vanished in silence. The bridge went still. No one cheered. No one spoke. Report, Keeler demanded. There was no energy spike, an engineer whispered. No weapon discharge. No spatial rupture detected. It just ceased. Before orders could be given, another ship drifted out of formation. Its engines shut down. Life support flickered. The crew was alive, but completely powerless. Then another. Then 5 more. Panic spread through the fleet like a disease. Still, Earth said nothing. No new signals. No fleets rising to meet them. Just that one repeating message, calm and unchanged. We told the galaxy to leave us be. Keeler realized something terrible. This was not a defense reacting in fear. This was a system that had already been awake. He ordered a retreat maneuver. Just a partial jump, enough to regroup. The jump drives did not respond. Space around the fleet felt heavy, thick, as if invisible hands were pressing inward. An officer shouted that their navigation stars were gone. Not obscured. Gone. And then, something worse. Every human signal across the solar system vanished at once. Cities. Satellites. Civilian networks. Earth went dark. Not destroyed. Silent. The planet still turned. Clouds still moved. Oceans still shimmered. But to the fleet's sensors, it was as if humanity had simply stepped out of reality. Keeler stared at the darkened world below. For the first time in his long career, he understood the meaning of the warning humanity had sent centuries ago. It had never been a plea. It was a courtesy. And now, whatever humans had been hiding, they had decided it was time to stop being left alone. The darkness around Earth was wrong. Supreme Marshal Keeler had commanded fleets through dying stars and collapsing empires. But he had never seen a world simply vanish from awareness while still existing in front of his eyes. The planet remained. Blue oceans, white clouds, the faint glow of city lights barely visible to the naked eye. But every advanced sensor in the fleet insisted it was no longer there. Earth was present, yet unreachable. Run the scans again, Keeler ordered, his voice steady by force alone. The technicians obeyed. They recalibrated. They switched systems. They reverted to older sensor models once considered obsolete. Nothing worked. It was as if the solar system had wrapped itself in a layer of refusal. Around the fleet, ships drifted out of alignment. Some had lost gravity completely. Others reported time delays between command input and system response, growing longer by the second. A few vessels experienced something worse. Internal corridors stretching impossibly long, bulkheads appearing where none should exist. Space itself was misbehaving. "This is not a weapon," Keeler muttered. "This is an environment." As if responding to the thought, another human signal appeared. Not loud, not dramatic. It emerged quietly inside every communication channel at once. Military, civilian, encrypted, and forgotten. No attempt was made to block or override security. The message simply existed. This time it was live. The image was poor, grainy. Humans. A single figure stood in front of a dark background. No insignia, no weapons visible. The human's face was calm, tired, and old in a way that spoke of responsibility rather than age. When the humans spoke, there was no anger in their voice, only disappointment. "You crossed a boundary," the human said. "Not a border. A promise." Keeler leaned forward. "Identify yourself." The humans shook their heads slowly. "Names are not important anymore." "Are you the commander of Earth?" Keeler demanded. "No," the human replied. "There hasn't been one of those for a long time." The answer unsettled the bridge more than any explosion could have. Keeler chose his words carefully. "Your systems interfered with our fleet. We interpret this as a hostile act." The human nodded, as if expecting that response. "Yes, that is accurate." Murmurs rippled through the bridge. "You attacked us without warning," Keeler said. The human tilted their head slightly. "No, we warned you centuries ago. You archived it, labeled it insignificant." Behind Keeler, a science officer whispered, "Marshal, long-range telemetry just updated." Keeler did not turn away from the screen. "Speak." "The missing ships," the officer said. "They are not destroyed. They are displaced, folded into localized spatial pockets. Stable ones." The human continued speaking, unfazed. "They are safe. For now." Keeler clenched his claws. "You are holding our ships hostage." "No," the human said softly. "We are holding your attention." Before Keeler could respond, another alert sounded. A star on the edge of the system dimmed. Not collapsed, not damaged. Dimmed, like a light behind a veil. Energy readings dropped by less than 1%, but the implication hit the bridge like a physical blow. That star powered half the fleet's recharge routes. "Restore that star immediately," Keeler demanded. The human looked almost sad. "We will." In a moment, the star brightened again, returning to normal as if nothing had happened. Silence swallowed the bridge. Keeler finally understood the scale of the situation. "You could have destroyed us," he said slowly. "Yes," the human replied. "But that would teach the wrong lesson." Keeler straightened. "Then state your demand." The human took a breath. "Leave. That is all?" Keeler asked. "Yes." "No tribute? No territory? No surrender?" "None." Keeler laughed once, harsh and disbelieving. "You expect us to believe this is mercy?" The human's gaze hardened, not with rage, but with memory. "This is restraint." At that moment, a report arrived from the fleet's rearguard. A vessel had attempted an unauthorized hyperspace jump. The jump failed. The ship did not explode. It did not tear apart. It simply stopped existing in the same way as the others. The human did not look surprised. "We told you," they said, voice quiet. "This region is closed." Keeler felt something he had not felt in centuries. Fear, not of death, but of the unknown rules now governing reality around him. "You hid," Keeler said. "You let the galaxy think you were weak." "Yes," the human replied. "Because the galaxy punishes strength it does not control." Keeler gestured at the darkened Earth. "And now," the human said, "you forced us to speak again." Data streamed across the bridge. Historical files long ignored began unlocking. Human activity patterns, energy anomalies dismissed as natural phenomena, centuries of unexplained events now aligning into a single, horrifying picture. Humanity has not been quiet. They had been careful. Their technology did not glow. It did not announce itself. It did not escalate. It waited. The human leaned closer to the camera. "We learned something early," they said. "Wars are loud. Preparation is silent." Keeler searched for an angle, any leverage. If you were so powerful, why withdraw from galactic affairs at all? The human's eyes flickered, not with weakness, but with pain. Because every time we spoke, they said, someone tried to take what we built. Every time we shared, someone tried to own us. A pause. So we chose isolation. We chose to grow without witnesses. Outside the viewport, another ship drifted free of formation, gently rotated, and froze in place, locked in space like an insect in amber. No explosions. No screams. Just control. Keeler swallowed. If we leave, what then? The human considered the question. Then nothing happens, they said. You go back to your wars. Your borders. You're forgetting. And if we do not? The human expression did not change. Then you will learn, they said, why we asked to be left alone instead of why we demanded it. The transmission ended. No dramatic cutoff. No final threat. Just silence. On the bridge, alarms continued to sound, but softer now, subdued, as if even the machines understood resistance was pointless. Keeler looked at Earth one last time. For the first time, he did not see a prize. He saw a boundary, and he knew, with terrible certainty, that humanity had not yet shown the galaxy what crossing it truly cost. The alien fleet remained frozen at the edge of the solar system. Not trapped, not damaged, simply held. Supreme Marshal Keeler had ordered all aggressive actions suspended. There was no point pretending otherwise. Whatever laws of war the galaxy understood no longer applied here. Humanity was not fighting with weapons. They were enforcing conditions. And conditions could not be outgunned. Across the fleet, panic tried to rise, and failed. Every crew knew the truth now. The movement invited attention. Attention invited consequences. Ships stopped drifting only when they stopped trying. Still, one question echoed through every mind. How? How had a species this quiet become this absolute? The answer began to emerge, not from humans speaking again, but from the data the fleet's own systems were now unlocking. Files that had always existed. Anomalies long dismissed. Patterns no one had bothered to connect. A science officer approached Keeler, trembling. Marshal, we've been wrong about humans for centuries. Keeler did not turn. Explain. We believe their technology stagnated, the officer said. But that was an assumption. They stopped competing publicly. They stopped exporting innovation. They stopped fighting. That does not create this, Keeler said, gesturing toward the impossible stillness around them. No, the officer agreed. But it creates time. The data expanded across the main display. Human energy signatures appeared, small, weak, easily ignored. But when layered together across centuries, a different picture formed. Humans had never pursued maximum output. They pursued efficiency, precision, and control. While other species built bigger weapons, humans learned how to touch reality gently enough to move it. They stopped asking how to break things. They asked how things broke themselves. Keeler felt the pieces align with sick clarity. Every unexplained fleet loss, he said slowly. Every vanished probe near their borders. Yes, the officer whispered. Human testing zones. But disguised as natural space. A low-frequency pulse rippled through the fleet, not damaging, not hostile. A reminder. Then the human transmission returned. This time, there was no face. Only stars. A slow, drifting view of the galaxy from an impossible distance. The human voice spoke, calm and steady. We know what you are trying to understand, it said. So we will explain. Once. Keeler stepped forward. Why now? Because you are already here, the voice replied. And because understanding may prevent panic. The stars shifted. The view zoomed inward, not toward Earth, but toward empty space between systems. This, the voice said, is where we began. Images appeared. Human vessels, centuries old, small and fragile by galactic standards. They drifted through deep space, not conquering, not claiming, observing. We learned early that visibility invites violence. The voice continued. So we learned how to exist without being noticed. The stars warped slightly. Subtle distortions formed, barely visible. These are gravity sheaths, the voice explained. Not shields. Not cloaks. Agreements with space itself. Keeler stiffened. Agreements? We do not force space to obey, the voice said, anticipating the thought. We ask the right questions until it answers. The view shifted again. Human cities appeared, not shining capitals, but ordinary worlds. factories, homes, children playing under artificial skies. All of this, the voice said, was built with limits. Every human system was designed with restraint as its first rule. The image darkened. Because the moment we learned how to end wars instantly, the voice continued, we learned something else. The stars flickered. Winning is easy. Living with winning is not. Keeler felt a chill spread through his core. The image changed again, this time to human history. Wars. Cities burning. Old conflicts that ended in devastation. We were not always quiet, the voice said. And when we were loud, we nearly destroyed ourselves. Silence. That is when we made a decision, the voice resumed. We would never again be the strongest voice in the room. The stars returned. Calm. Endless. We would be the last one. Across the fleet, systems stabilized slightly. Not because humans had relaxed control, but because they were allowing the ships to exist comfortably within the rules now imposed. Keeler spoke carefully. You could have ruled the galaxy. Yes, the voice replied. And we would have lost everything that made us human. A pause. So we chose a different role. The view zoomed out again, showing the solar system. Earth dark but present, wrapped in unseen layers. We became a boundary. Without warning, one of the frozen ships was released. Its systems rebooted. Gravity returned. Power stabilized. The crew gasped as they regained control. No damage. No warning. The voice spoke again. We do not punish curiosity, it said. Only force. Keeler realized the cruelty and the mercy of that rule. You let the galaxy forget you, he said. Yes. And if we had never come, then you would never have known. The voice answered simply. Another ship was released. Then another. Slowly. Deliberately. A demonstration, not of power, but of choice. Keeler felt his authority dissolve into something smaller. Responsibility. You are not hiding anymore, he said. No, the voice agreed. We are clarifying. The stars shifted once more, forming lines, trade routes, invasion paths, borders that had existed for ages. Then the lines faded. These mean nothing to us, the voice said. They never did. What do you want then? Keeler asked. The answer came without hesitation. To be left as we asked. A final image appeared. Earth, now glowing faintly again as human systems partially returned. We did not build this to conquer, the voice said. We built it to make conquest unnecessary. The transmission began to fade. Keeler rushed to speak. If another force comes, one larger than us, what will you do? The voice paused. Exactly what we are doing now, it said. Only faster. The signal ended. The fleet remained intact. Alive. Released, but changed. Keeler looked at his officers. None spoke. They had arrived expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had discovered something far worse. A species that did not need to threaten the galaxy, because it had already decided where the galaxy was allowed to go, and where it was not. The release was not freedom. Supreme Marshal Keeler understood that now. As more ships regained control, crews celebrated quietly, carefully, like prisoners allowed into the yard for the first time. Systems stabilized. Gravity returned. Navigation lights flickered back to life. Yet no one attempted to move beyond the narrow tolerance humanity allowed. The solar system had become a place with rules, and humans enforced them without raising their voices. Keeler ordered the fleet to hold position, not because he feared punishment, but because motion itself now felt like a question asked too loudly. Across the bridge, a navigation officer spoke in a low voice. Marshal, we're detecting movement. Keeler's eyes snapped to the display. From where? The officer hesitated. Everywhere. Space around the fleet shifted, not violently, not suddenly. Distances changed in ways that did not trigger alarms, but made the mind ache to follow. Stars slid a fraction out of place. Familiar constellations rearranged themselves by degrees too small to be obvious, yet too deliberate to be natural. Then something appeared. Not ships. Not fleets. Intent. Objects that had been cataloged for centuries, asteroids, dust clouds, cometary debris, began to move with purpose. Their paths curved, not toward Earth, but around the alien armada. A slow enclosure. They're using natural mass as maneuvering assets, a science officer whispered. That's impossible without enormous energy. No, another interrupted. Not energy. Coordination. The realization struck the bridge like a physical blow. Humanity was not fielding a fleet. They were conducting space. A human signal returned, audio only this time. "You are searching for our warships," the calm voice said. "You will not find them." Keeler spoke carefully. "Then what is this?" A pause. "This is traffic control." The asteroid stopped moving. Perfectly. Frozen in place, they formed corridors, wide, clean paths of empty space between walls of inert stone. "Those are your exits," the voice continued. "They will remain open for a limited time." Keeler stared at the display. "And if we do not use them, then space will resume its natural behavior," the voice said. "Unpredictable, unforgiving." One of the fleet's younger commanders broke protocol. "You expect us to believe you can hold an entire armada hostage with rocks." The human voice did not respond immediately. Instead, one asteroid, barely 10 kilometers across, shifted slightly. It did not accelerate. It did not collide. It rotated. As it did, gravity around it changed direction. A nearby alien cruiser was gently pulled sideways. Not enough to damage it, just enough to push it out of formation and into another corridor. No alarms. No resistance. The message was clear. "Yes," the human voice said. "We can." Keeler felt the old instincts rise. Anger, pride, the reflex to challenge authority. He crushed them. "You are not soldiers," he said. "You are operators." "Correct," the voice replied. "Soldiers escalate. Operators resolve." Data began streaming again. Human vessels, finally visible. They were small, sparse, barely armed by traditional standards. No massive cannons. No visible shields. They moved only when necessary. Each appeared for seconds, adjusted something subtle, then vanished, slipping back into folds of space too gentle to register as cloaking. "They're not fighting us," an officer said quietly. "They're editing the battlefield." The fleet's long-range sensors detected something else. A second force, another alien alliance, drawn by the same assumption of weakness, had entered the outer reaches of the system from a different vector. Larger, less cautious. Their ships burned hot, confident, and loud. "They didn't receive the warning," someone muttered. Keeler watched as the newcomers advanced. The human voice returned, quieter now. "We will give them one chance," it said. A transmission was sent, short, direct. "Leave." The second alliance ignored it. They accelerated. The first human response was not aimed at the ships. It targeted distance. The newcomers found themselves traveling longer. Engines burned. Time passed. Yet the space ahead did not close. Their velocity remained constant, but the destination retreated. "They're stretching the metric," a science officer gasped. "They're increasing the distance without increasing space." Keeler had never heard fear sound like that before. The second alliance opened fire, long-range plasma lances cutting through empty darkness. Nothing answered. Then one of their ships simply stopped. Not disabled. Stopped. Velocity reduced to zero relative to everything else. Its escort slammed past it, unable to slow in time. Collisions followed. Panic spread. The human voice spoke again, not to Keeler's fleet, but to the newcomers. "You are approaching a protected region," it said. "Your weapons are unnecessary." The response was a barrage. Humanity replied by turning off the star. Not fully, just enough. Energy output dipped by a fraction, barely noticeable on a cosmic scale. For the second alliance, it was catastrophic. Their reactors starved. Shields flickered. Weapon systems failed as power balances collapsed. They were not destroyed. They were rendered helpless. Keeler watched in stunned silence. No explosions. No victory cries. Just correction. The human voice returned to him. "This is why we do not maintain fleets," it said. "Fleets imply conflict. We maintain balance." One of Keeler's advisors whispered, "Marshal, if they wanted us dead, we would already be gone." Keeler finished. The second alliance attempted to retreat. The corridors shifted. Some ships escaped. Others did not. Those that failed to comply were not destroyed. They were placed. Anchored in stable pockets of space, alive, powerless, preserved. Exhibits. Keeler finally understood the true horror. Humanity was not punishing aggression. They were curating it. "You are teaching the galaxy," he said. "Yes," the human voice replied. "Because lessons that hurt less are remembered longer." The corridors around Keeler's fleet widened slightly. "Permission." Keeler turned to his officers. "Prepare withdrawal." Full compliance. No one argued. As the fleet began its slow exit, Keeler looked back one last time. Earth was visible again, not dark now, but calm. Quiet lights traced continents. Storms rolled peacefully across oceans. Humanity had not risen to meet the galaxy. They had adjusted reality until the galaxy learned how to behave. And as the last of his ships passed through the corridor, Keeler knew one thing with absolute certainty. The strongest force humanity had revealed was not power. It was restraint. The withdrawal corridors closed behind the alien fleet with no sound at all. One moment, space was open. The next, it was simply no longer an option. Supreme Marshal Keeler watched the last navigational markers fade from his displays as his fleet slipped beyond the boundary humanity had drawn. Engines burned. Systems responded. Space behaved normally again. That should have brought relief. It did not. Because Keeler understood something now that chilled him more than any weapon ever had. Humanity had not ended the danger. They had contained it. And containment meant readiness. Inside the solar system, Earth began to speak again. Not loudly, not proudly. Communications returned in fragments. Civilian channels blinked back online. Orbital traffic resumed with careful precision, like a city reopening after a silent evacuation. But beneath that calm surface, something enormous was happening. Deep below Earth's crust, systems older than any alien empire awakened fully for the first time. They were not weapons. They were costs. Human leaders gathered in places no alien sensor could observe, not because they hid, but because observation was no longer allowed. They spoke plainly, quickly, without ceremony. The calculations were brutal. Activating the final layer of Earth's defense would shorten lives. Not immediately, not violently, but permanently. Energy drawn from the planet's core would alter tectonic stability. Magnetic fields would weaken. Radiation shielding would thin by fractions. Small numbers that meant nothing to empires, and everything to a species that lived on one world. Humanity had always known this moment might come. That was the price of restraint. We can still stand down, one leader said. They're leaving. Another shook their head. They'll talk. And others will listen, a third added. Silence followed. Humanity did not fear the fleet that had come. They feared the ones that would come next. The ones who would not knock. The ones who would arrive were already firing. The decision was made without a vote. Not because humanity lacked debate, but because some choices stopped being political long before they became necessary. Across Earth, lights dimmed. Cities reduced power. Transportation slowed. Entire regions accepted rolling blackouts without being told why. People complained. People are worried. No one panicked. Somehow they felt it. That quiet, heavy sense that something important was happening far above them. In orbit, human operators moved with precise calm. They did not shout commands. They did not rush. They synchronized. The planetary defense lattice came online, not as a shield, but as a conversation between Earth and space itself. Gravitational harmonics aligned. Temporal drift was corrected down to billionths of a second. Earth was no longer just a planet. It was an anchor. The first warning came from far beyond the solar system. An incoming force, larger than the first. Faster. Less curious. They did not scan. They did not send messages. They came with weapons hot and drove screaming. Keeler's fleet detected them too, still retreating through deep space. Panic erupted among his officers. They're ignoring us, one said. They won't listen. Keeler closed his eyes. He knew exactly what would happen. The second invasion force entered the outer defense perimeter. Nothing stopped them. No corridors formed. No asteroids moved. For a brief, terrible moment, it looked as if humanity had done nothing at all. Then Earth answered, not with force, with commitment. The planetary lattice engaged fully. Across the solar system, space stiffened. The incoming fleet felt it immediately. Drives overloaded. Navigation failed. Ships drifted, not randomly, but inward, toward invisible focal points. They fired. Their weapons vanished into nothing, absorbed by layers of warped distance that bent energy into harmless loops. Humanity did not return fire. Instead, they paid. Earth's magnetic field dipped. Aurora flared violently across the poles, visible even in daylight. Seismic tremors rippled through fault lines that had slept for centuries. Human operators watched the numbers climb. Radiation levels increased by decimals that would matter years from now. No one looked away. The incoming fleet reached the point of no return. Then space folded. Not violently. Not dramatically. The entire armada was removed. Not destroyed. Not displaced. But excluded. Their coordinates ceased to exist in any reference frame that allowed interaction. They were gone. Not dead. Gone. The lattice powered down immediately. Earth groaned. Storm systems destabilized. Tides shifted by centimeters. Satellites required emergency recalibration as orbital mechanics subtly changed. Human doctors would see the effects decades later. Human scientists would spend generations repairing the damage. No one celebrated. Across the galaxy, sensors screamed. Empires that had watched from afar saw the impossible spike, and the equally impossible disappearance of a force that should have shaken stars. Data flooded the Galactic Council chambers. Panic followed. They replayed the event again and again, searching for weapon signatures. They found none. Only absence. Only the unmistakable sign of a civilization willing to harm itself rather than allow the galaxy to harm it again. A single human transmission followed. Open. Unencrypted. Short. This was not an attack. This was a boundary being enforced. We paid the price so you would not have to learn it the hard way. Keeler received the message in silence. Around him, his officers stared at the display. They sacrificed their own world, one whispered. Just to stop them. Keeler nodded slowly. Yes, he said. And that is why no one will ever test them again. Back on Earth, the skies glowed strangely for days. Scientists explained it away as solar interaction. Governments promised infrastructure repairs. Life went on. But humanity knew. They had crossed their own final line. They could never use that defense lightly again. And that was exactly why it worked. Because the galaxy now understood the most dangerous truth of all. Humanity's greatest weapon was not what it could do to others. It was what it was willing to endure to protect its right to be left alone. And somewhere, far beyond human space, plans quietly died in the minds of those who had once thought Earth an easy target. The galaxy did not explode into war. That surprised everyone. After the second invasion force vanished, removed from existence so completely that even their last shadows could not be traced, many expected panic to turn into violence. Ancient empires had built their identities on dominance. They did not like unanswered power. But something else happened instead. Silence spread. Trade routes slowed. Border skirmishes ended mid-conflict. Fleets that had been mobilizing quietly powered down and returned to dock. Orders were rewritten. Plans were burned. Because every civilization, no matter how proud, recognized one truth when it finally stared back at them. Humanity had not acted like a conqueror. They had acted like a line. And crossing that line had erased an entire armada without spectacle, without rage, and without pursuit. In the chambers of the Galactic Council, the air felt heavier than usual. Delegates who once argued loudly now spoke in measured tones. Some did not speak at all. The humans had not been invited. No one dared. A historian from a long-lived species broke the silence. We assumed absence meant decay. Several heads lowered. We assumed silence meant fear. Another admitted. A third delegate spoke, voice thin. We assumed restraint meant weakness. That word lingered. Restraint. Data projections filled the chamber, maps of human space overlaid with centuries of ignored anomalies. Regions where fleets had vanished and no one had investigated. Places labeled hazardous, unstable, or naturally dangerous. They were not natural. They were human margins. We never conquered them, the historian said slowly. Because there was nothing to conquer. And now we understand why. Across the galaxy, military academies halted lessons mid-cycle. Strategy simulations were rewritten overnight. Every model that relied on escalation collapsed when humanity was added as a variable. Because humans did not escalate. They ended. Keeler's fleet returned home battered not in hull, but in belief. Veterans who had once spoken proudly of conquest now refused command promotions. They did not resign in protest. They resigned in understanding. We encountered a species, Keeler reported to his superiors, that does not threaten. It simply decides. The report was sealed. Too dangerous for public morale. Smaller civilizations reacted differently. They did not fear humanity. They approached it. Refugee ships changed course, drifting closer to the quiet regions around human space. Not crossing the boundary, but staying near it. Trade envoys requested contact without demands. Explorers altered routes to pass adjacent to human systems, as if proximity alone offered safety. Humanity did not respond with treaties. They responded with consistency. They did not expand borders. They did not patrol beyond their line. They did not intervene in distant wars. They simply remained. And that presence changed everything. Pirate clans dissolved. Slavers abandoned routes near human space. Predatory empires quietly redirected expansion efforts away from the region. No one wanted to be the next lesson. On Earth, life moved forward, imperfectly. Scientists tracked subtle changes in the planet's systems. Slight increases in radiation exposure. Small but measurable shifts in climate patterns. Repairs began that would take generations to complete. Children still went to school. Farmers still planted fields. Cities rebuilt damaged infrastructure slowly and carefully. Humanity absorbed the cost it had chosen to pay. No one called it heroism. They called it responsibility. A global message was released months later, not dramatic, not proud, just honest. We did not save the galaxy. We protected our home. If that makes the galaxy safer, let it be a side effect. That message spread farther than any weapon ever could. In places far from Earth, leaders stared at it for a long time before speaking. Some deleted it immediately. Others archived it with shaking hands. The Galactic Council convened again. This time, the agenda was short. A motion was proposed: humanity to be designated a non-intervention sovereign zone of absolute autonomy. It passed unanimously, not because of respect, because of fear mixed with clarity. Humanity was no longer underestimated. It was understood. And understanding brought restraint. Years passed. Galactic politics shifted. Wars still happened, but more carefully. Borders stabilized. First strikes became rare. Every commander now asked the same question before acting. What would happen if humans cared about this? The answer was always the same. We don't want to find out. In a quiet observatory on Earth, an old human operator watched the stars. Their hair was gray now. Their hands trembled slightly as they adjusted the telescope. A younger colleague asked, "Do you think they'll ever thank us?" The older human smiled faintly. "No," they said. "And that's fine." "Why?" "Because if they're thanking us," the operator replied, "it means something went very wrong." The telescope focused on deep space, on the boundary humanity had drawn. Nothing crossed it. Nothing tested it. The galaxy moved around that quiet region like water around stone. Humanity had not demanded peace. They had made war unnecessary where they stood. And that was enough. Far away, in forgotten corners of space, old warlords told new recruits stories meant to scare them straight. They spoke of a species that did not conquer, a species that did not chase, a species that simply asked, once, to be left alone. And what happened when that request was ignored? Power did not vanish from the galaxy. It paused. That distinction mattered. In the years after humanity enforced its boundary, the great empires still existed. Their fleets still filled docks. Their weapons still worked. Their pride still whispered that dominance was their birthright. But none of them moved the same way anymore. Because power had been redefined. Strength was no longer measured by how loudly a civilization could strike, but by how carefully it could decide not to. The first empire to understand this was not the oldest or the largest. It was the one that had nearly challenged human space out of habit alone. They stopped. Mid-expansion, their fleets were already mobilized. Supply lines stretched. Political speeches were written. The public had been promised victory and growth. Then the high command canceled everything. No explanation was given. The admirals were furious. Politicians demanded answers. Markets shook. And yet the fleets returned to dock. Later, in a sealed chamber, a single image was shown to the ruling council. A projection of the empty space where the second invasion force had ceased to exist. No explosions. No wreckage. No aftermath. Just absence. This, the admiral said quietly, is what happens when someone decides you are finished. The council voted to stand down. Not forever. Just indefinitely. That vote echoed across the galaxy. One by one, the strongest powers made similar choices. Expansion slowed. Borders hardened instead of spreading. Wars were delayed, then canceled, then forgotten. Not because of treaties. Because of awareness. Humanity had not declared itself a guardian or a judge. It had done something far more unsettling. It had proven that decisions could be final. Smaller civilizations noticed immediately. They had lived for centuries under the shadow of larger neighbors. Their histories were lists of concessions, survival strategies, and quiet losses. Now, for the first time, something had shifted. They did not rush toward Earth. They did not beg for protection. They simply changed how they behaved. Trade routes realigned to pass near, but never through, human space. Diplomatic gatherings began, including a silent assumption: humanity does not need to be invited. Their absence was felt more strongly than presence ever had. Keeler watched all of this from retirement. He had resigned after returning home, not in disgrace, but in exhaustion. The galaxy he had served no longer existed in the same way. Young officers came to him now, asking questions they had never asked their instructors. How do you fight an enemy you can't threaten? Keeler always gave the same answer. You don't, he said. You learn not to be their enemy. Some listened. Some did not. The ones who did rose faster. Those who didn't eventually disappeared from command, reassigned, sidelined, or quietly removed after proposing plans that no longer made sense. Humanity had not rewritten galactic law. They had rewritten context. On Earth, the cost continued to unfold. The planetary defense lattice remained dormant, sealed behind layers of authorization that no single human could access alone. Its activation had shortened life expectancy by fractions of years, numbers that would never make headlines but would be felt in hospital wards decades later. Humanity accepted that. They always had. Memorials were not built to celebrate victory. They were built to remember restraint. A new generation grew up knowing the truth, not as propaganda, but as history. They learned that humanity could have ruled, and chose not to. That choice became identity. The Galactic Council convened again, years after the incident. This time, there was no fear in the chamber, only respect shaped like caution. A proposal was introduced, not a law, but a principle. The principle of non-provocation. It stated that any action taken near human space would require unanimous approval from all signatory civilizations. It passed. No one wanted responsibility for being the one who tested the boundary. The historian who had first spoken during the crisis addressed the chamber again. We misunderstood humanity, they said. We thought power was something they hid, but it was something they restrained. Silence followed. Now, the historian continued, we must decide what kind of galaxy we wish to be. One that forces restraint upon others, or one that learns it itself. No vote followed. None was needed. Outside the chamber, stars burned quietly. On the edge of human space, a small convoy of civilian ships passed through a trade lane. They were not human. They carried no weapons. Their crews slept easier knowing what lay nearby, not as a shield, but as a certainty. Nothing hostile crossed that region. Not because it was guarded, because it was respected. In military academies, new case studies replaced old ones. Students learned that escalation curves had endpoints now, and that endpoint was unacceptable. Humanity became a constant in every simulation, an immovable variable, a reminder that some outcomes were worse than defeat. And so, the strongest civilizations chose something that would have been unthinkable before. They chose to stand down. Not surrender. Not submission. Stand down. They invested in stability instead of conquest. Infrastructure instead of armadas. Diplomacy instead of dominance. It was not peace, but it was closer than the galaxy had ever been. One evening, back on Earth, the same old human operator returned to the observatory. They stood with a group of students now, curious minds, sharp questions. One student asked, "Do you think we did the right thing?" The operator considered the stars for a long moment. "Yes," they said finally. "Not because it worked, but because we were willing to pay for it." "And if someone tries again?" another student asked. The operator smiled, not kindly, not cruelly. "Then we'll remind them," they said. Once, the galaxy did not sleep easier because humanity was powerful. It slept easier because humanity had proven something far rarer, that there were lines even the strongest were afraid to cross. And for the first time in a very long time, the galaxy learned that standing down was not weakness. It was wisdom learned the hard way. The galaxy did not remember victories. It remembered the consequences. Centuries passed, measured not in wars won, but in wars that never began. Borders stabilized into habits. Ambitions softened into negotiations. The great armadas still existed, but they became symbols, ceremonial, deterrent, rarely moved. And at the center of every long-term plan, every simulation, every whispered argument in closed chambers, there was a quiet assumption no one questioned anymore. Human space is not an option. Humanity did not expand, did not recruit allies, did not declare itself a protector. They simply endured. Earth healed slowly. Scientists learned how to strengthen the planet's magnetic field again, how to compensate for the changes humanity had accepted. Cities adapted. Architecture shifted. Energy grids evolved to waste less, draw smarter, and never again flirt with collapse. The planetary defense lattice remained dormant, sealed not behind secrecy, but behind consensus. No single leader could activate it. No crisis alone was enough. Humanity had decided that if it ever had to be used again, it would mean everything had already failed. That knowledge was shared openly. The galaxy listened. Years later, a distant empire collapsed, not by invasion, but by internal fracture. Power struggles erupted. Refugee waves spilled outward, desperate and unarmed. They did not flee toward human space. They stopped short of it. Because even in desperation, no one wanted to bring chaos too close to that boundary. Instead, something unexpected happened. Human civilian ships, medical, agricultural, unarmed, appeared at the edge of the crisis zone. They did not cross borders. They did not interfere politically. They provided aid. Quietly. Efficiently. Without announcements. And when the situation stabilized, they left. No flags planted. No influence claimed. Just help given and withdrawn. That act changed the final shape of humanity's legacy. The galaxy realized something then. Humanity was not indifferent. They were selective. They would not rule. They would not chase. They would not forgive aggression. But they would respond to need. Carefully. On Earth, children grew up hearing the story, not as myth, not as warning, but as context. They learned that once, the galaxy had ignored a simple request, and that humanity had answered, not with rage, but with resolve. The phrase entered human language quietly. Leave us be. Not as a threat, as a principle. In the Galactic Council, records were updated. The human incident was no longer classified as a conflict. It was reclassified as a correction event. A permanent footnote was added beneath it. This outcome is not repeatable. Humanity paid a cost it cannot be expected to pay again. That line alone deterred more wars than fleets ever had, because it implied something terrifying. If humanity ever chose to pay that cost again, the galaxy might not survive it. Keeler died quietly, long after his name faded from public memory. In his final years, he wrote a private reflection, not for command, not for history, just for himself. We mistook silence for weakness. We mistook restraint for fear. And we mistook patience for surrender. Humanity taught us the difference. The document was discovered decades later and archived under psychological studies. Cadets still read it. On the far edge of human space, a navigation buoy drifted, ancient by now, maintained out of tradition rather than need. Its signal was simple, repeating in dozens of languages. No warning tones. No weapons data. No force projections. Just words. This region is stable. Do not attempt to change it. No one ever did. Because the galaxy had learned the final lesson humanity never needed to teach again. Power that seeks attention is easy to challenge. Power that seeks conquest is easy to resist. But power that asks for nothing and enforces that request absolutely, that power becomes permanent. Humanity did not win a war. They ended a pattern. And so the galaxy left them alone. Not because it was ordered to. Not because I was afraid. But because it was understood. Far above Earth, stars burned as they always had. Ships passed at safe distances. Trade flowed. Life continued. Humanity remained quiet. Not forgotten. Not underestimated. Simply respected. And that was why, for the rest of galactic history, no armada ever turned toward Earth again. Because some warnings only need to be ignored once.